This video contains spoilers for Hazbin Hotel and also contains some discussion about sexual abuse. Timestamps are provided in the description of the video as well as in the video itself if you wish to skip these segments. Thank you for watching. Why on earth did I make a video about Hazbin Hotel that's over an hour long?
Why does anyone do anything? Sheer, absolute boredom!
And also any excuse to talk about Alastor, my little ace in the hole.
A what now?
Hazbin Hotel deserves praise for what it has accomplished. I remember watching VivziePop's videos before Hazbin Hotel was even a thing. It's genuinely a joy to watch their creativity grow and birth a runaway success. It is very clear this is a labour of love from an animation standpoint, and what Hazbin and Hell of a Boss have done for independent animation is astounding. It's a testament to what can actually be achieved in spite of tough competition or even the current climate when it comes to the YouTube algorithm. The characters are fun and entertaining and very relatable. The best one, of course, being Alastor. The juxtaposition of its Disney-esque Broadway stage show feel with its literal hellish setting has resulted in a loyal, if overzealous fan base. A fan base that, in my personal experience, wears their fanaticism on their sleeve, giving the show endless praise and calling any negativity toward the show as hate instead of valid criticism. But you could say this about literally any fandom ever. Also, I'm one to talk. So this show is far from perfect, but as I have said in previous videos for Hazbin and Hell of a Boss, I do like these shows. I wouldn't spend so much time writing about them if I didn't enjoy them. But I also see that the way I frame these videos with words like "why Hell of a Boss sucks" can be seen as clickbaity, but I also want to be clear that I am going to be harsh on the show in spite of liking it, hence the title. I want to be clear that there is a difference between giving constructive criticism and hating on something. The difference between a hater and a critic is that they are literally on the opposite sides of the spectrum. A hater tears something down purely because they can. A critic points out what can be done for something to improve, if they can figure that out within the confines of what the show gives for us to work with without diving into fan theories. I'm not saying that fan theories are a bad thing, I just don't want to rely on fan theories to help answer basic world building questions, because a show should be able to do that on its own if the writing is solid enough, which sadly to me, the writing for both shows simply isn't. Both shows rely on supplemental material like podcasts or tweets from the creators of the show itself to answer basic world building questions, or even panels at conventions. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Getting answers to basic world building questions in a show like this shouldn't feel like homework. Being told that VivziePop answered a certain question in a podcast or a live stream or a panel at a convention at a certain point in time tells me there is an answer, but I have to dig for it. And frankly, I just don't want to put in the effort to do so, because things like this should be answered in the show itself. You know, basic world building questions like how exactly does death work in this universe? Why can people die in hell again? If people can die in hell again, then hell isn't forever, is it? But we'll get to all that later. I feel that it's important to learn how to give constructive criticism as well as how to take it, and that's an ongoing journey for me as a content creator and critic. I have made mistakes in the past and I will make more in the future. I am human after all, that's part of the human condition, and I make these videos entirely by myself. For me, my motives behind these videos is for me to express my experience that I had while watching the shows and movies I watch. What I enjoy doing most when consuming media is looking at how they're made, what makes them tick, how they're written, the journey it took to get to the final product, and whether or not it appeals to me. Though there is a lot of anger and frustration with how I present my thoughts at times, and yeah, that can come across as hateful. But believe it or not, in spite of all this negativity I'm saying toward the show, I do genuinely like Hazbin Hotel, but as I've said before, it is very possible to like something and also want it to be better, to allow yourself to see the flaws and imperfections and come up with solutions on how things could be improved in your opinion. Of course, critics have no power to actually put these changes into motion, but I make these videos because I want to have a discussion and hope that said discussions can happen without things becoming mean-spirited. Fans of this show are very loyal, I get that, and in my experience will come to its defense when anything negative is said about it. I posted the thumbnail for this video after watching the first 4 episodes, and at the time only 4 episodes had been released, so I was advised to wait until all 8 episodes were released before posting posting a video. So yeah, let's address the thumbnail issue. I definitely jumped the gun and threw out this statement of Hazbin Hotel being a bloated mess without appreciating how it could be interpreted out of context of the video that the thumbnail was for. People thought that I was referring to the character designs instead of the show itself, screenshotting the thumbnail for this video when I tweeted it out before sharing the video itself did understandably shake the hornet's nest that is the Hazbin Hotel fandom, and people resorted to calling my character ugly, telling me to redesign her instead of waiting to hear what I actually had to say about the show and why I felt that it was a bloated mess. What I didn't expect was Vivzy Pop herself, the creator of Hazbin and Hell of a Boss, liking the tweet that called my character ugly. Okay, not a big deal, she just liked a tweet, that was it. Though after releasing the thumbnail for this video calling the show a bloated mess, yeah, that can also be seen as hateful and mean-spirited, so... Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a bloody hypocrite. So let me explain what I mean when I say that Hazbin Hotel is a bloated mess. Let's talk about the show's premise. The series follows Charlie Morningstar, the princess of hell, daughter of Lucifer, as she sets about fulfilling her seemingly impossible dream of opening a hotel called Hazbin Hotel, which aims to rehabilitate sinners in hell so they can enter heaven. Due to overpopulation, hell goes through an annual purge where angels, led by Adam, descend from heaven and kill demons to ensure hell would never rise against heaven. So Charlie's Hotel gives sinners a chance for redemption, to avoid being purged, and to potentially get into heaven, thus solving the overpopulation problem in a more humane way that offers sinners a chance to choose between eternal damnation or the chance to be redeemed. Hazbin Hotel has its own unique identity that makes it stand out from other R-rated animated shows, with nods to Invader Zim and a hell of a lot of anime, as well as 90s Disney animation. There's also a clear nod to Broadway musicals, not just with the music itself but also in the show's staging and cinematography. The premise alone feels very fresh to me and it is a lot of fun, but this show is not flawless. It has a lot of problems. It really is one of the most frustrating shows I have ever watched. It makes it really hard to like a show when it has so many issues. Though the presence of Alastor makes it so much easier. We know that episode 1 takes place 1 week after the events of the pilot. I have to ask why they didn't just remake the pilot as the first episode proper. Viewers watching the series without seeing the pilot may feel like they're being left behind on a few things, since the characters don't really get any proper introduction in the Amazon series like they do in the pilot. Though I suppose fans would probably complain about the first episode being a rehash of the pilot if they did just remake it, though I do feel this would better serve the show to expand beyond its loyal fanbase. Though the pilot is not part of the Amazon series, it does serve better as a first episode as it introduces all the characters of the main cast as well as presenting the plot and gives the audience time to emotionally connect with Charlie, seeing her humiliated on live television. In the Amazon series, she proposes her idea to Adam, who is the lead of the extermination angels, who humiliates her, but since no one else other than Lute sees this humiliation, I feel that this moment doesn't have the same weight to it when it comes to establishing the plot compared to how it's established in the pilot. Though episode 1 is more about Charlie taking steps to talk to heaven rather than to hell. So this would mean the pilot is essential viewing to the series really. What this scene in episode 1 does do though is it shows that Charlie, in spite being the princess of hell, doesn't command authority well. She's awkward, sensitive, empathetic, and rushes into executing her ideas without delegating things out or thinking things through enough. She's proposing this redemption thing to Adam without even knowing if redemption is possible or even if those who are redeemed will be accepted into heaven in the first place. It serves as a great character scene, but makes this story have a very rocky start. The Amazon series feels like it was written pretty much exclusively for the fans who were already obsessed with the show, and honestly, very little effort was put in to make a coherent story that would draw in new viewers. But as someone who does consider themselves a fan of Hazbin, believe it or not, jumping from the pilot to the Amazon series, I kinda miss the janky rough edges of the pilot. I feel that there's so much more energy in how the characters move in spite of the fact that the animation is inconsistent in comparison with the Amazon series. You'll also notice a difference between Alastor in the pilot and Alastor in the Amazon series. I don't just mean in design alone, but with how he interacts with other characters in the pilot. He's very much right in their faces and invades their personal space a lot. That doesn't really happen in the Amazon series all that much, and I honestly kind of missed that. But then I just remembered that he appears in Charlie's bed at one point. I know what you're expecting me to say right now, and I'm not going to because he's ace and so am I. But then again, characters invading personal space seems to be a common thing with Vivzy Pop's animation style. I also feel that the potential that the pilot had to be made into a series was kinda lost in the Amazon series, if I'm perfectly honest. It feels like Hazbin Hotel went from an indie passion project to being one of the most, if not the most successful animated release for Amazon, with a star-studded red carpet premiere and billboards all over Times Square. The marketing for this series was bloody insane. The build-up of the anticipation for the release of this series has been unmatched. 4 years of this build-up. Feels kind of like no matter what we were going to get, we were going to be disappointed if we are going to be waiting for that long a time. But let's not forget that this show was delayed partly due to the SAG writers' strike, which I myself picketed at, by the way. I'm going to mainly focus on the writing of the show in this video, but I really need to talk briefly about how the show looks, especially the character designs. It's been said by plenty of people before that the designs of the characters are just too busy. Apart from Alastor, he's perfect. Husk to me being the worst example. All these details, hearts and spots everywhere. You know, less is more. Every single character though is admittedly incredibly unique. Though one of the things I really wanted to speak up about is the lack of body diversity on the show. All the characters seem to be tall, skinny beings, apart from Nifty, who's a short, skinny bean. Kind of find it funny that a lot of people assumed Nifty was a child. Did you guys forget that short people exist? She is canonically 22 years old. Though let's not call her short. Let's call her portable instead. Or let's not forget Lucifer, our short Prince of Darkness, shall we? Oh, he's so small. Why? Although I don't understand his obsession with rubber ducks. What's with that? Just a cute gimmick? I don't know. Oh, of course it's because we're subverting everything that we're taking from Abrahamic religions when putting it into this show. Lucifer being obsessed with rubber ducks isn't that cute. I wonder if he knows what the primary function of a rubber duck is.
My daughter wants to see me! Take that, depression!
Oh, so it's the neurodivergent thing. I can't relate to that at all. And though yes, all good things come in small packages, but so does poison. Speaking of poison, we'll get to that later, trust me. And then when we do finally have a character with a different body type, she's the most annoying character in the entire show.
Hey, yes, it's me. I know you were all waiting for me.
How dare you interrupt Lucifer and Alastor's song? You know, she kind of reminds me of Madam Mim in a way. It's funny because her name is Mimsy. It's implied that the two of them don't quite see eye to eye and can go months without any communication, but when Lucifer does come on the scene, we see he does genuinely care about Charlie, but also wants to protect her from failure and disappointment. And this can come across as being unsupportive and dismissive of her idea. I feel that there was a build-up to some kind of conflict between them that was then interrupted with a song, and then during and after the song it was suddenly extinguished. Yeah, the song here is incredibly heartfelt and touching and showed how strong their bond is, but at the same time, in context of the show, I honestly don't feel this bond was earned at all. The song served to solve the conflict instead of it being dealt with head on. The show struggles to successfully set itself firmly in stone, fails in making the rules clear before running headfirst into breaking them or subverting what's expected. The lore feels incredibly flimsy to me, paying more attention to developing the characters that exist in the world and throwing more characters at our faces before we even understand how the world works. And it turns out the characters that exist in this world have no clue how their world works either. The idea of solving an overpopulation problem by rehabilitating sinners so they can get into heaven without knowing if heaven would even accept them? What about everyone who doesn't pursue redemption? Like Cherry Bomb, for example. She doesn't pursue redemption. Are people like her supposed to just endure the exterminations? Giving people the opportunity for redemption, not for the individual's sake, but to solve a world problem of overpopulation instead, feels like it's just trying to fix a world that is never made clear how it actually works, instead of actually wanting to genuinely help individuals to be redeemed. And when the date of the purge is pushed forward by Adam by 6 months, that does place pressure onto Charlie to prove her idea will work. But I also have to ask, if sinners are going to be under pressure like this and become desperate to avoid the purge instead of wanting to genuinely pursue redemption, doesn't that go against the whole point of this supposed to be a free will thing?
I have a question. If Freaky Face over there is so powerful, then why can't he just make people stay here?
Oh, trust me, I can.
Oh, I'm sure you could, my love.
We can't force sinners to stay here. They need to choose to.
Ah, so they need to choose to, but you have no problem with manipulating them to make said choice, do you, Vaggie?
Sinners are desperate, maybe desperate enough to try anything to escape the extermination.
Being pressured and coerced into going to the hotel should not be seen as a good thing. Vaggie sees this as an opportunity to get more people to come to the hotel. Having sinners be under pressure and being desperate for redemption to avoid the purge, to her is seen as a good thing because she's trying to help Charlie with her idea and wants her idea to succeed. But Vaggie's motivation to me feels more like she just wants to make Charlie happy instead of actually genuinely wanting to see other sinners redeemed. Which is kind of interesting because you would think, being a fallen angel herself, she would be the one that would want redemption the most. Or perhaps forgiveness the most. Therefore, to me, other than Charlie, she should be the one that would want to prove that redemption is possible the most. The fact that Vaggie is so determined to make Charlie's idea work shows how supportive she is as a girlfriend, but I just wish that the show portrayed Vaggie to be someone that was seeking redemption more clearly, instead of it all being about serving Charlie's idea. I feel this adds to the problem of how this world and the story works, and as we discover, the characters themselves don't seem to have any clue how their world works either, or the rules on who gets into heaven and how. And to me, the very idea that the Exorcist purge is kept a secret from heaven itself, I really don't understand why. You could have Sarah trying to keep the purge a secret from Emily herself, but the entirety of heaven? I don't think it's very believable that an entire population would not be aware of an exorcist purge being carried out, especially when the entire army of exorcist angels are just outside the gates of heaven and aren't exactly very quiet about it. And you would also think, if it's happening outside the gates, that Peter would see this. Peter being, I'm assuming, is meant to be Saint Peter, the first pope. You know, the guy that is in charge of who gets through the gates of heaven. You would think he would have some knowledge of how people get into heaven. So I really do feel that the idea of a hotel in hell that rehabilitates sinners is a clever and unique premise. What I do want to say though, and this is gonna sound absolutely insane and crazy here, but I'm gonna just come out and say it. Do we even need the purge plot here? It honestly only seems to serve as a ticking clock for the plot and the device for how Vaggie gets to hell in the first place. How about instead of it being a purge by exorcist angels from heaven, it's a purge carried out by citizens of hell, the demon lords for instance, controlling the population of hell. If we have to have a war at all, I feel it would be far more interesting for it to be a civil war instead. But then I would also feel, if we went this route, that it wouldn't feel like the story is about the afterlife or existentialism anymore, but rather about who gets to live and who gets to die. And then there's the question of whether or not it makes sense for the story to be set in hell at all. It could be set in any kind of fantasy realm and not much of the story would really need to be changed. It's a problem that a lot of shows that are about the afterlife have. Shows and movies that speculate on the nature of the afterlife is one of those magical abilities afforded by film. Movies and TV shows that tackle this topic do feel like an authentic and sincere study of finding the core of existentialism. Existentialism being a form of philosophical inquiry that explores the issue of human existence, exploring the questions related to the meaning, purpose, and value of human existence. The entire concept of there being a heaven and heaven being the place where good people go and hell being the place where bad people go is in itself an exploration into the value of human existence after they die. Hazbin Hotel is definitely an existentialist approach to the concept of the afterlife, being that there is no master plan, there is no God in this series, no one is fated to go to heaven or hell. Instead, this is about complete freedom of choice. In other words, an existentialist believes that we are born without a purpose and it is up to us to find meaning in life and make that happen. The problem that Hazbin Hotel has in its concept and premise is that it pulls a lot from Abrahamic religions, where their philosophy is the complete opposite of existentialism, in the sense that this is a show that explores death, freedom, isolation and meaninglessness, but also explores redemption and who gets to go to heaven and who has to go to hell. This to me is the root of the confusion of how hell in Hazbin Hotel works. Hazbin Hotel may not be the first animated show to be set in hell, that goes without saying, and it's also not the first animated show to tackle existentialism or discuss the afterlife. It's also not the first show to have a premise about whether or not a soul after they have passed on can be redeemed. A soul that is doomed to hell can be afforded a second chance and get into heaven. The Don Bluth movie, All Dogs Go to Heaven, springs to mind here. Hypothesizing about the afterlife is never an easy task, and I do feel that Hazbin Hotel, in spite of the premise being about rehabilitating sinners, just doesn't feel like it's tackling the philosophy of human existence like it was implied it would. Maybe I'm just too obsessed with the show The Good Place or something, which has a similar premise to Hazbin, promising and delivering a comedy that is a philosophical study of the human existence as well as ethics and morals. The Good Place is more about facing death rather than facing the afterlife, but I feel like the premises of both Hazbin Hotel and The Good Place are very similar, so I felt it was right to bring this up. To me, The Good Place is what Hazbin Hotel could have been if they just trimmed the fat a little, focusing more on Charlie and the hotel itself and her exploring what redemption means, along with the characters who live in the hotel. Instead, there are far too many plot lines to follow and very little runtime to let any of the characters be fully developed. It's something I wish Hazbin was more committed to. Charlie's journey of discovering what it actually means to be good while also guiding other people toward redemption. Yeah, this is more about me wanting this to happen rather than a legit critique. And it isn't exactly fair to compare a show that's only had one season released so far to a show that has 4 seasons and the first season was released in, I don't know, 2016 or something. But this show is more focused on an ensemble cast rather than just Charlie herself. It's not a story about learning what redemption means, although in my opinion it should be. Instead, redemption is afforded to characters without understanding the how or why yet. It's a musical comedy that subverts what heaven and hell is usually portrayed as for its sake of it, showing a war between angels and demons instead of giving focus to the characters who are legitimately looking for redemption. It results in a story that is trying its best to tell a lot more than what can be told within a 160-minute runtime. True, this was the result of corporate meddling, but I feel that a lot could have been trimmed back, so more focus could be on the characters instead of introducing new characters in every single bloody episode. New twists and new side plots to keep up with. It's giving me too much to digest. I feel this could have been spread out across 2 seasons instead of squeezed into 8 20-minute long episodes, but I think this is something that we should forgive Hazbin for. The way we watch shows and movies has changed substantially since the pilot first aired. Streaming sites releasing entire seasons of a show in one go, feeding into the binge watching culture that is rampant nowadays. You could easily watch the entire first season of Hazbin Hotel in one day. And if you've been waiting for this show since the pilot aired, waiting for 4 years for something like this, it's highly likely that a lot of fans were very disappointed that it was over so fast. All of that build up, it being over in a day. I think that fans also had a lot of time to build up what they wanted the show to be and how the characters were going to be portrayed in their minds, long enough for it to almost become canon within the fandom, forgetting that fanon and canon are not the same thing. So then when certain characters behave in a different way that contradicts what they build up in their mind, they automatically are disappointed in the show. The way that fans are able to celebrate the shows and movies they like nowadays is far different to how it was when I was growing up. Or maybe they latched onto a character because they finally saw their sexuality represented. I know I did when I saw Alastor and learned that he was canonically asexual. I feel so seen. Yes, LGBTQ representation in media is incredibly important to me, which is another big reason why this show is so popular to so many people. But also the fact that this show is an R-rated show without looking like every single other R-rated show that's out there that I'm aware of anyway, is another thing that sets it apart. With so many R-rated animated shows nowadays are just basically Family Guy clones. This is an R-rated show that does rely a lot on the freedom that rating gives it, but it also doesn't fall down the cliche of, ooh, it's R-rated, let's shock and offend as many people as possible. Though the constant profanities is a little excessive in my opinion, when the show does use swears, they are used as comedic emphasis, or even to offer insight into a character's personality and mannerisms. For instance, some characters swear constantly, so after a while it becomes white noise, but another character might never swear and then suddenly swears to emphasize some kind of shock value. Alastor, for instance, never swears, but when he meets Lucifer, swears in his face.
I am the host of the hotel. You might have heard of me from my radio broadcast.
Nope. I guess that's why Charlie called it the Hazbin Hotel. Ha ha ha.
Ha ha ha! It was actually my idea.
Ha ha! Well, it's not very clever.
Ha ha! Fuck you.
And later is heard calling Susan, one of the cannibals in the cannibal sector,
Ornery old bitch.
The profanity is definitely a feature of this setting. This is set in hell after all, which is, in Hazbin Hotel's case, a place for rebels, outcasts and evildoers. Violence, chaos and depravity are commonplace here, and that includes profanities. But at the same time though, because there's constant swearing in this show, the dialogue often feels a little diluted, and the swears eventually lose their emphasis because they just become a basic element of how every character talks. Ironically, Adam being the worst of them all. Every second word out of Adam's mouth is a profanity, and he talks this way in heaven as well. But then again, the first heavenly being we meet other than Adam is Saint Peter. I don't know, just hearing the F word come out of the mouth of the character who's meant to represent Saint Peter, who was the first pope, just feels so wrong to me, but also oh so right. But I bet you if confronted about it, Peter would deny it 3 times. And I know that joke will only be funny to those who grew up a Christian, but whatever. Adult animation seems to have this rule that in order to appeal to adults, it has to be as violent and raunchy and controversial as possible. Though Hazbin Hotel does tick all of these boxes, I feel that here it makes sense due to the show's premise. It is set in hell after all, it's to be expected to have that kind of content, but I do also feel that it's hell is often used as an excuse to dismiss problems of the story's narrative. Hell of a Boss has the exact same problem. It's hell, nobody cares. And I do also feel that subversion is too heavily relied upon here. Subversion, to me, should never be a substitute to building a coherent world. A lot of effort is put into subverting expectations instead of into the story or the world itself. Charlie herself is a subversion of the Disney princess trope. Adam is a subverted version of what is expected of the biblical figure of Adam. The exact same thing can be said for Saint Peter, especially when he drops the F-bomb. Though subverting expectations is literally about doing the contrary of an established belief or assumption for the purpose of being fresh and interesting, I don't think this alone should serve as the formula for an entire show unless it is a literal parody of something that already exists. Hazbin Hotel is not a parody, but it does use this technique to use plot twists in a story to surprise and challenge the audience. But surprising and challenging the audience should not be the only reason for plot twists or reveals to be in your story. They should be in there to serve the world building and the development of the characters. I do feel a lot of sincerity here, but there's also a lot going on, and possibly too much. The show does have an appealing charm to it, but I also feel that too much focus was placed on how everything looks in this show instead of actually focusing on the story or stories, plural. Let's be real, the premise here is unashamedly grim. But the show is also upbeat, quirky, edgy, and has a lot of pieces to a puzzle that fans can put together, making diving into fan theories very intoxicating. But as I've said in other videos I've made on this show, as well as the spin-off show Hell of a Boss, a lot of questions regarding the rules of Hazbin and Hell of a Boss are filled in by fans or supplemental material instead of within the shows themselves. I'm not asking to be spoon-fed how the world works or anything, but assuming the audience will just put the pieces together while trying to keep up with the pace of this show feels a little unfair, especially for those who haven't seen the pilot. Basic questions like learning the difference between a hellborn demon and a sinner demon. It's difficult to differentiate the two. The visual bible of the characters in this show is so incredibly confusing. In the pilot as well as in the show proper, sinners can die in hell. It doesn't have to be the angelic weapons. They can be run over by a car, or shot, or stabbed, or whatever. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The fact that characters can die in hell to me tells me that this isn't really hell. Hell to me, in an Abrahamic sense anyway, is meant to be a place of eternal suffering. If characters can die in hell, then it's no longer hell, is it? If characters can die in hell, then hell is literally not forever, is it, Adam? Then the whole question of the fact that when characters die in hell, they can be redeemed. They can get into heaven. I'm hoping that this is going to be answered in season 2. So let's talk a bit about the show's main character, Charlie Morningstar. Charlie Morningstar is trying to see the good in everyone and wants to give everyone a chance to prove that they can be better. This is an admirable goal to work toward, but I do have to ask, what are Charlie's motivations here? Does she want to solve the overpopulation problem because she's the Princess of Hell and that's her duty to her people to find a better way to solve the problem? Or is she doing this to avoid facing her own problems, as Husk points out to her in episode 4? I personally feel that Charlie is sincere in what she's doing, but I do also feel she is ridiculously naive and way over her head here. She seems to have no understanding of how redemption works, or even if a sinner can be redeemed, or even if the sinner will be accepted into heaven at all if they are redeemed. She definitely puts her heart and soul into everything she does, but doesn't really use her brain at any point, coming up with activities and games for the hotel characters to do as a group instead of focusing on the individual journey. Basically, they're all going through group therapy headed by a character who isn't a therapist. As this is a show set in hell and the rules seem to follow Abrahamic religions for the most part, redemption in this case means to be delivered from sin and its consequences. The consequences in this world seem to be living in an overpopulated world full of violence, exploitation, humiliation, vengefulness, and eventually being purged by an angel. Though the show itself doesn't explain where sinners go when they die, I assume they simply cease to exist. There is no afterlife after heaven or hell, I assume. The purge is death for the dead. It would be nice if this was made clear in the show though. And I don't think that's too much to ask for. Like, how does death exactly work? The terms sinners and demons are interchangeable here as well, which adds even more confusion as to the difference between a hellborn demon and a sinner demon. Alastor, for instance, is very confusing. He is a sinner, but he's also a Wendigo demon, I think? And then there's the whole thing about how some demons can own the souls of other demons. Does that make them more powerful? Does that mean that if a character sells their soul, does that somehow protect them from the purge? What is the deal there exactly? Or maybe it's a case-by-case thing. I don't know. The whole thing about Alastor owning Husk's soul, for instance. I want to learn more about this, and I wish it was explained in season 1, so hopefully it will be explained more in season 2. So if a sinner or demon, whatever it is, can die in hell without the angelic purge, could the overpopulation be solved within hell itself? What if instead of it being angels doing the purge, that it was instead fallen angels or even demon lords doing the purging, and Charlie had to stand up against the demon lords instead of angels? And if Alastor is a demon lord, then having Alastor on Charlie's side would be hugely beneficial, making it a civil war in hell instead of a war between heaven and hell. Definitely make the story feel a lot simpler. But then we also learned that Husk also used to be a demon lord. I just want to know how he got all that power. We know how he lost it, by selling his soul to Alastor. How did he get it in the first place? But more to the point, where does the power that he had go? Does it go to Alastor? Is that how it works? I just want to understand the mechanics of how things work in this version of Hell, and I really honestly feel like the show itself simply doesn't explain enough. Or maybe I'm just not paying good enough attention. But like I said earlier, I shouldn't have to go digging through supplemental material like podcasts and tweets and live streams or panels from conventions to get answers to these questions, which I feel are about basic world building. Also, I want to bring up Hell of a Boss very briefly here. I already made a video about how the Asmodeus crystals completely nullifies the point of immediate murder professionals, because if crystals exist that open portals to the living world, that would mean that IMP's access to the living world is no longer unique as they claim it to be in their commercial. This also makes the entire idea of getting into heaven completely moot, because if these crystals exist, what's stopping a sinner from getting a hold of one? And if they did get a hold of one, would they go to the living world as a demon? Or would the crystal provide them a human disguise as it does for Barbie? Or would they reincarnate as a human and be able to live all over again, therefore be able to redeem themselves that way? But also, if these crystals exist and a sinner could go back to the living world with one, what's stopping them carrying out their own revenge on the living instead of hiring IMP? More to the point, the people that IMP are hired to kill are likely to end up in hell, and if this is the case, that would further add to the overpopulation problem in hell, and also that sinner could get their own revenge on IMP. So Hell of a Boss somewhat works against the very premise of Hazbin Hotel. But since the purge plot is not brought up in Hell of a Boss, is this even a thing that affects the imps at all? We know imps can die, the same as sinners can, and they can get hurt, so what's the point of the purge at all if sinners, imps and demons can in fact kill each other with normal means? In Hazbin Hotel, it states that only angelic weapons can kill angels, but then Hell of a Boss also states that angelic weapons can kill demon royalty. This would imply that demon royalty can't die by normal means. Demon royalty in Hazbin's case being Lucifer and Charlie. But we see that Charlie can get hurt when she fights Adam. So let's talk about the whole Vaggie being an angel reveal that absolutely no one saw coming. With how dramatic the scene was when Charlie finds out that Vaggie was an angel, it would have been even more dramatic if the audience learned at the same time as Charlie that Vaggie was an angel, instead of a few scenes earlier when Adam goes to see Vaggie at their hotel room. Kinda letting the cat out of the bag a little bit early there, aren't we? But it turns out it wasn't a well-kept secret after all, because Carmilla also knew that Vaggie was a fallen angel, but then, as she said, it's not exactly rocket science to figure that out.
You know I'm an exorcist? How?
You have a giant X over your eye and wield an angelic spear. It's not rocket science.
I want to ask a question. Why was Charlie more upset that Vaggie lied instead of Charlie being angry that Vaggie literally helped to kill thousands of her people?
The person I trust most has been lying to me for years. Heaven refuses to listen, even if they did. I can't prove the hotel worked. 3 years I've been sharing my life with her, and I tell her everything. My hopes, my dreams, my insecurities, my embarrassing habits, what fucking deodorant I like. And she keeps something like this from me?
It would have also have been nice if we saw how the other residents of the hotel reacted to learning about Vaggie's secret. But no, instead we get a tit joke.
Where are your wings?
Nifty, I don't have...
Did you ever think maybe she's sensitive about her lack of wings? Just like her lack of tits?
Yeah, where are your tips?
This whole conflict was solved way too fast, and I just feel that this should have played a bigger part in the overall story. I wanted Charlie to learn firsthand what forgiving someone meant, what granting someone redemption actually meant, so that she could experience it herself. Because isn't that the entire point of the hotel? To give people a second chance? That's the whole thing that Charlie is trying to do. So when she vents all of this to Rosie, Rosie says that Vaggie is trying to redeem herself too, which is a very true statement, which I love, but I also feel that Vaggie trying to redeem herself had far too much potential to be a bigger part of the story here, and it just feels like it was being brushed under the rug.
What do you do when someone you love lies to you about who they are? My girlfriend is an exorcist angel, and she never told me.
Oh, shit! Quite a secret. How does that make you feel?
How does that make you feel? This shouldn't be your takeaway here, Rosie. I was expecting more of a reaction from Rosie instead of her being like a therapist. So how does that make you feel? I just think that is ridiculous. I feel like, oh, the princess of hell is in a relationship with an exterminator angel, one of the creatures who is responsible for dozens, if not hundreds, of deaths.
She took part in the very thing we've been working so hard to end.
Wow. Isn't that silly hotel of yours all about redemption?
Yes?
Perhaps this girl was trying to redeem herself too.
Rosie was not the right character for Charlie to hear this from, considering she's only known her for 5 minutes, even that. Perhaps Rosie was meant to be more involved with Charlie's journey in an earlier draft or something, and due to the limited time that they had, having only 8 episodes, they simply did not have time to introduce Rosie earlier. Rosie is clearly meant to serve as a mother figure to Charlie, and perhaps this is why the two of them have this moment together. Charlie also vented to Alastor about Vaggie earlier in the same episode, but I feel Alastor was far more focused on getting prepared for the upcoming battle at the hotel and helping Charlie with that rather than her own personal issues. So as we said earlier, since Charlie doesn't really have a clue whether or not redeeming a soul will even work or how a sinner could get into heaven, wouldn't it serve the story better if she learned firsthand how to grant said forgiveness and redemption to her own girlfriend, especially after discovering her secret? I mean, Rosie didn't even know who Charlie was when they first met, so why is Charlie being so trusting to Rosie right off the bat, revealing to her that Vaggie is an exterminator angel? Also, when Vaggie goes to confront Carmilla Carmine about being the overlord that killed the exorcist angel, and Carmilla asks Vaggie,
Before you found out about me, did you know angels could be harmed?
No.
say that again, Vaggie, slowly.
No.
You didn't know that angels could be hurt until you found out that Carmilla Carmine killed an exorcist angel, even though Loot ripped out your eye and tore your wings off, causing you to be a fallen angel in hell before you even met Charlie.
No.
And she also didn't know that angelic weapons could harm angels, even though Loot herself used angelic weapons to hurt her.
Angelic weapons? It's that simple? How has no one else figured this out?
Oh gee, I don't know. Plot contrivance?
Angelic steel isn't common, and those who have it aren't exactly rushing off to test it against exorcists.
So you're telling me that no one else figured this out? That only angelic weapons can hurt angels, but yet after every single purge they just leave their angelic weapons lying around in hell? Come on. If she's an exorcist angel that killed hundreds of sinners, you'd think this reveal would have far more repercussions for her as well as for Charlie, since Charlie is a royal. A royal being in a relationship with a being who is responsible for the deaths of dozens, if not hundreds of sinners, that sort of thing should have shaken up hell. They could have had this revealed to the entirety of hell with Vox, for instance, who has a power to brainwash the sinners of hell with a hypnotic power that could persuade the denizens of hell to revolt against Charlie and attack the hotel as a way for him to get to Alastor directly. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that instead of a purge, we could have a civil war within hell. To me, that would be far more interesting. Also, circling back to when Vaggie and Charlie sing the song together, which is a reprise of the song that Lucifer sang to Charlie, I personally feel that this shouldn't have been a reprise. The song was between Charlie and her dad. So for me, hearing Vaggie singing that song just didn't quite feel right. I feel that there should have been an original song for the two of them to sing to each other about how much they love each other and how Charlie forgives Vaggie for lying to her for all this time, for hiding the fact that she's an angel. And then perhaps it's revealed that Vaggie in fact didn't kill dozens of sinners and was actually saving them, and then was caught by Loot, and that is how she ended up as a fallen angel. If the show had more time, this would probably have been very possible to do, and would probably help to simplify the story down a lot and make it feel less bloated. Instead of Charlie sending Vaggie off to Carmilla to be trained on how to kill angels, Vaggie would already know
how to do it because she's already been hurt by angelic weapons, so therefore would already know that angels can be hurt by angelic weapons. So then this would be their advantage of fighting against angels with having one already on their side. We wouldn't even need to have the subplot of Carmilla killing an exorcist angel this way, meaning that we could spend more time with the story of Vaggie and Charlie coming to terms with the fact that Vaggie hid this for so long. There are so many subplots in this show, with Vox trying to get to Alastor, for instance, which feels like that subplot is kind of piggybacking off of everything else, instead of actually being a vital thread of the overall story. The only thing that I can see that connects the V's and the hotel, other than the obvious rivalry between Alastor and Vox, is the story between Angel and Val.
Before we move on to the next section of the video, I wanted to preface it with a disclaimer. This will be discussing SA and other forms of abuse associated with the topic, so if you want to skip this part, go to this timestamp. Angel Dust is the first to go to Hazbin Hotel and seems to be in no hurry to leave. In spite of his bold and confident persona, Angel is trapped in a deal with Valentino, one of the antagonistic overlords of hell. It's also revealed that Angel is in an abusive relationship with Valentino, and when this is revealed, his facade does begin to slip, and we begin to see the real Angel when Husk befriends him, saving him from self-destructive behavior after Charlie goes to the studio while he's working. The show does portray Angel as an emotionally vulnerable character during the song Poison, as well as in the music video Addict, though during his time at the hotel he does form friendships with the other hotel inhabitants, often removing said characters from dangerous situations, like when he drags Pentius back to safety, or when he takes responsibility with Nifty when she gets drunk, and is encouraged by Husk especially to be more than what people expect him to be, that he can just be, as cliche as it sounds, himself. The song Loser Baby, some have, in my opinion, misinterpreted it as associating being a loser with being a victim of SA. And though I do understand how people came to that conclusion, that is completely not the case here. To me, Husk was basically trying to communicate to Angel that he wasn't alone in his situation, that if he just let down his facade and let people in, he could form true connections that are psychologically deeper and healthier than what Angel has experienced up to this point. I do like that Husk didn't make any attempt to connect to Angel until he let his mask drop. Angel telling Husk that it wasn't an act, that this was who he needed to be, also gave Husk the door to reveal that he was also living under a mask for so long. And in a way, both of them have had to put on facades, because both of them wanted to avoid to face reality that they were losers. This to me is definitely the best song of the series. Not just in a melodic sense, or that it's Keith David singing, and come on, that alone makes it the best song of the entire show, but in a character sense, story sense, and visual sense as well. The stories of each character in the hotel, not just Angel and Husk, do seem to be somewhat loosely connected. Angel to me has the most development out of all of the characters of the show other than Charlie. Everything else about most of the other characters seems to be kept in the dark. There is so much depth to Angel which seems to often be ignored or written off, not just by fans but by the characters in the show. Angel is an actor as a profession, and in my experience of working alongside actors, I have seen that it can be difficult for someone who works in that profession to just switch off from work when that's what you do for a living. And it can be even harder to do so when you form said performance as a shield to protect yourself or to avoid vulnerability, which is what I believe Angel is doing here. He is a character that, quotes, gets his fun, unquote, if you want to call it that, but he's also a character who is portrayed as someone who gets lost in his interests and, kinks, quote unquote. There has been a lot of speculation on episode 4 of the Amazon series saying that it glamorizes SA, and though I can 100% see why people come to that conclusion, I have to say I do not agree. Yeah, the show does have a lot of glamorization, but it's more about glamorizing the industry that Angel works in rather than glamorizing SA itself.
To touch lightly on this topic, as I am a survivor of SA myself, I feel that Angel may represent people who, as a way to process trauma, chooses to relive it. While most people will react to trauma by repressing it or doing their best to avoid being in a situation that may lead to SA, Angel is someone who fixates on it, asking for trauma elements to provide a way for them to process said trauma by reliving it in a scenario they know they are in full control over, or at least they gave consent to, can help to process said trauma. Though the show successfully conveys how corrupt said industry is in both the show as well as in real life, it also manages to show it in a more accessible way, like with the scene with BDSM. For Angel, this is the most trust-based thing you can do, which is very true. BDSM is a healthy way for someone to play around with said scenarios, knowing you are with someone who will listen and respect your boundaries. It's about brandishing and relinquishing control, the enjoyment of physical control, psychological control, and or pain. I like that this show did not automatically associate or confuse BDSM with SA, which has been done so often in other pieces of media. Though this may be extreme and vulgar to some people, myself included, but then I'm asexual, so I would find it this way. But Angel being so open to share this with his friends from the hotel is actually very interesting to me. It's not done in a comedic or shocking way, or in a disrespectful way, but rather in a way I kind of find ironically tasteful. What a shame this is completely undermined in a later episode when Pentious is dragged into a room seemingly against his will at a club. But we also see that Angel can be responsible, looking out for Nifty, for example, when she can't handle her booze, and also standing up to Val while in the club, as it's revealed that Val can only control what Angel does within the studio. So Angel is a character who is constantly wearing a mask as a shield, so when in the hotel he is challenged by Husk to stop being fake, he doesn't know what else to be until Husk relates to him that we are all losers here. As a character, I have noticed that a lot of fans seem to undermine him and ignore his good traits because of the industry he works in, and that is incredibly unfair in my opinion. What I do wish we had more of, though, when it comes to Angel, is more interaction between Alastor and Angel, and it's not because of the fact that so many people ship these two characters together. It's because Alastor is canonically ace, and having no interest in whatsoever, and Angel being someone who works within the industry, would have been really interesting to see. Not in a romantic way, though I'm sure a lot of fans would want to see that. I mean that we have maybe one scene when they exchange a few words and then they never speak again. Although that might be the Alastor fangirl in me just wanting to have more time with the ace in the hole, shall we say. Speaking of the ace in the hole, shall we talk about Alastor for a while?
Alastor has a lot going on under the surface. Out of all of the characters in the show, he's the most mysterious and alluring to me. But then that's sort of the entire point of a demon. Thanks to a lot of Renaissance art and Christian propaganda, the visual representation of a demon is usually shown as some kind of satyr creature, mainly to present paganistic symbolism as evil. Of course, paganism has nothing to do with Christianity or Satanism, but what I'm saying here is the design of the demons or sinners in this show are meant to be alluring and somewhat seductive, as demons are essentially beings of light, appealing as much to the human senses as possible. One of the reasons why most of the characters appear as foppish gentlemen in suits and bow ties in this show is for the purpose of being alluring. Courtesy is also an attractive quality, so is a smile, and Alastor is the epitome of an angel of light. Despite being a sinner demon, Lucifer himself is a literal angel of light, and being dapper is a huge part of that alluring quality, but I personally feel that Alastor pulls it off more successfully than Lucifer does, ironically. But his playful exterior hides a darker side. He is narcissistic and even sees himself as being above Lucifer himself. Alastor is one of the overlords of hell and is modelled after a Wendigo demon, a wickedly charismatic demon who helps Charlie with her dream of running the hotel, more for his own amusement than sincere support, I think. He is more chaotic than the rest of the characters and does tend to keep himself separate from the group and spectate instead. His smile is a powerful thing, and I don't just mean in a literal sense. It dominates those around him. He never lets his real emotions show, or perhaps he's unable able to, due to also being trapped in a deal himself. But that's going down fan theory territory, so let's circle back here. As I said earlier, I feel that Alastor and Charlie's relationship could have been made clearer before Lucifer showed up. The song Alastor and Lucifer sing together is my second favourite song of the entire show, but it is sadly interrupted by Mimsy, my least favourite character of the entire show. She dumps exposition for Alastor for the audience and for the characters in the show, which does help to bring some clarity to what exactly Alastor is, but I personally feel that this could have been and should have been delivered by a character we, actually know. In the pilot, it was Vaggie who told his story, which I feel makes more sense, especially now knowing what Vaggie is. She would have the intelligence and sense to know and learn as much about demons as she could, so it would make sense for her to be the one to communicate what Alastor was, while also leaving it vague enough to not lose the mystery. Alastor fighting Adam and inevitably being defeated by him was a moment I feel that needed more build-up, and though it was clear that they were not of equal match of power, Alastor was the smarter of the two and would have succeeded in outsmarting him if Adam didn't resort to fighting dirty, causing Alastor to retreat. I do like the contrast between the two, Adam the angel being sloppy and vulgar, while Alastor the demon is being courteous and polite, and also calculative in the fight, though Alastor's mistake was just simply being a little too cocky, and that was what ultimately resulted in his defeat. Probably another reason why it's so satisfying to see Adam be literally stabbed in the back by Nifty. Yeah, I'd happily watch this on loop over and over and over. And look at that, I'm editing a video about Hazbin Hotel, so I have to watch it on loop over and over anyway. Perks of the job, I suppose. Alastor is my personal favourite character for many reasons, and I suppose it's mainly to do with him being the wild card of the group. Playing games with the characters, playing host of the hotel while also having no faith in it whatsoever, simply enjoying seeing what he thinks will inevitably fail. But there's also an element of compassion toward Charlie that I do find endearing and authentic from him. It doesn't feel like an act, it feels like he genuinely does care about Charlie. And I like that it's not from a romantic perspective, but is instead as a mentor kind of relationship. At the same time though, there's something about Alastor I simply do not trust. There's something else going on that he's keeping to himself. Who owns his soul, for instance? And I'm sure this will come to light in season 2. Wait, what do you mean Lilith's just been chilling on a beach in heaven this entire time? Yes, it's kind of obvious that this is probably who Alastor made a deal with, but come on. You're gonna drop that on us right at the end? I mean, I know we need a hook in order for us to wait with bated breath for season 2, but this is just too much to process for me. So Luke tells Lilith that her deal is done after throwing Adam's halo at her feet. She wanted Adam dead? I mean, she wanted Adam dead again? And just throwing this out there, I know this is kind of going into headcanon territory again, but since Pentheus was able to go to heaven after Adam killed him, what if after Nifty killed Adam, he came back as a demon in hell? After everything Adam did, this is far more deserved because, after all, if someone can be redeemed and enter heaven, what's to stop an angel from being thrown out of heaven? I mean, that is kind of where Lucifer came from in the first place. Not to mention it would be just so satisfying to see Adam be a demon and then have to avoid the very purge he was in charge of for so long. I feel that the epilogue at the beginning of the series showing Lucifer being cast out from heaven and then introducing Adam and Lilith and later Eve and showing Lucifer and Lilith falling in love and having a daughter could serve as its own series in itself, like a prequel series to Hazbin Hotel. But this is another problem that Hazbin Hotel has. Its premise is based on Abrahamic religions, but it doesn't include God. And I understand why they went down this route, because including God in this would somewhat alienate a lot of people, but also possibly just be asking for trouble. That's frankly unavoidable when you have a show that is about the afterlife. In fact, it did occur to me a few times that the story of Hazbin Hotel could work without it being set in hell. It could be set in its own world, and then it would have more room to invent its own rules as to how this world works, instead of it being limited to what hell is perceived to be based on the rules already set by Abrahamic religions and Dante's Inferno, which the show takes a lot of inspiration from. So in a way, I feel that the setting of hell works against the story of Hazbin Hotel. Maybe instead of it being set in hell, you have it set in limbo instead. That way the concept of the hotel would serve as what a hotel literally is. A place for people to stay at temporarily before they move on. I know I'm asking for a lot here. I just personally feel going down this route would mean that the entire concept of Hazbin Hotel would feel less bloated if it just simplified things down a bit. Just change a few elements here and there. Trim the fat. So we're finally at the conclusion of this monster of a video. The lore of Hazbin Hotel is, to me, incredibly confusing and often contradictory. The premise of the show is overpopulation, and though the diverse cast helps to better illustrate this, I also feel it's introducing way too many new characters within a short amount of time and expecting the audience to be emotionally invested far too soon. Unless you're a long-time fan already, I don't think this show is very accessible to new viewers. It's obvious how much of a positive influence Hazbin has had on independent animation. The fandom grew before Hazbin Hotel, the series, was even released. It has a lot going for it, and that's kind of the problem. It's a lot, and it's incredibly messy to me, and perhaps too much, which is why I feel that it is a bloated mess. Each of the main characters seem to be fighting for the spotlight, while the lead character isn't allowed to grow enough to carry the story. In spite of being the daughter of Lucifer and the Princess of Hell, she doesn't seem to use that authoritative power and instead shies away from it. Tonally speaking, this show is all over the place. It promises a dark comedy set in hell, but what we actually get is a dark comedy set in a poorly established confusion world that tries to suddenly be serious and emotional at points that had no lead up to it. It doesn't take its time to let the rules be explained and set in stone before just jumping straight onto the treadmill that delivers plotline after plotline, and you're struggling to keep up with the threads of what's going on. Saying that, the main cast themselves are strong enough for the audience to get attached to and relate to, but I also feel that in order for this world to make sense and for the characters to be more believable rather than relatable, we need to give the audience a character who is learning how the world works along with the audience. As relatable as all of these characters are, none of them function as the audience's avatar, and we also don't really have a character functioning as the guide for an avatar either. There's very little navigation within the show proper for us to understand how this version of hell works. You have to look for this elsewhere outside of the show, within the fandom or within supplemental material. This to me is Hazbin's biggest problem, other than it being a bloated mess. It's simply trying to do too much while also not doing what it needs to feel believable to me. It has a lot of good things going for it, but not enough holding it together. And it squeezes so much into the 8 episodes that it makes the show have a breakneck pace, which is incredibly dizzying to me. It is a show I really want to like, but I struggle to do so because there's so much I feel the show could do so much better if it just had more time to let the stories breathe and the characters breathe within the world. But I am glad we are finally done with this video. Time to move on from the subject, I think. At least until season 2 is released anyway and we get more Hell of a Boss content. I'm Mad Munchkin. Stay creative.